Hello and welcome to Umbral Dread. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, unsettling stories that quietly pull you deeper into the shadows, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Settle in, let your body relax into stillness, and allow the outside world to slowly fade into silence. Tonight, something lingers in the dark waiting to be heard. So close your eyes, listen carefully, and let yourself drift into the depths of Umbral Dread. Story 1. To understand what happened to me, you first have to understand what my job actually is. I'm a commercial deep-sea diver. When I tell people that, they usually imagine scuba diving. They picture someone in a wetsuit with a tank on their back, swimming around in clear water, relaxed, looking at coral or shipwrecks. That's not my world. My job is basically heavy construction in a place that does not want you there. It's work done in freezing water, in total darkness, with pressure so heavy it feels like the ocean is trying to squeeze you into something smaller. Most of the time, you can't see your own hands. You can't hear much besides your own breathing and the voice in your headset. It's like doing welding inside a pitch-black tank while the environment tries to crush you, freeze you, and confuse you into making one mistake. The gear is nothing like scuba gear. I wear a big, rigid helmet made of brass and fiberglass that locks completely around my head. It seals into a thick rubber dry suit with a hard neck ring. Once it's latched, there's no turning your head freely, no pulling a mask up, no taking a quick breath of fresh air. You're sealed inside your own little metal world. The most important thing is the umbilical. That's what we call the thick bundle of hoses and cables that connects me to the ship on the surface. People hear cord and think it's something thin. It isn't. It's a heavy, stiff bundle that drags behind you like a tail. Inside that umbilical is everything that keeps you alive. The main breathing gas supply, a pneumatic depth gauge line, a communications wire so I can talk to my supervisor topside, and a hot water hose that pumps heated water through my suit so I don't freeze to death. That's not an exaggeration. At depth, the cold will kill you fast without hot water running. When you're 200 feet down, you are completely dependent on that umbilical. It's not just equipment, it's your lifeline. If it gets cut, you have a small emergency bailout bottle on your back that gives you a few minutes of air. But at that depth, you're usually too far down for a safe ascent. Even if you can breathe, your body can still die because coming up too fast can tear you apart from the inside. You live and die by that line and by the voice of your supervisor in your ear. That job, that mindset, is the only reason I'm alive right now. We were out in the open ocean on a repair job. A massive crude oil pipeline had taken damage, and inspections showed microfractures forming in the steel. My task was straightforward on paper. Go down, find the damaged section, grind out the cracks, and weld a thick steel patch over the pipe to reinforce it. It's the kind of work I've done before. It's stressful, but it's normal stress. Procedure, tools, checklist, nothing mysterious. The dive started like any other. I geared up on the deck of the support vessel while the ocean tossed us around. The sky was gray, the kind of dull weather that makes everything feel colder, but the surface conditions don't matter much once you get deep enough. Down there, the ocean isn't choppy. It's still, perfectly still. That stillness is part of what makes it so unsettling. My tender helped me step into the dry suit. He checked seals, lines, valves. He moved with the calm efficiency of someone who has done the same ritual hundreds of times. He connected the umbilical to my suit and tested flow. Then he lifted the heavy brass helmet and lowered it over my head. The weight settled onto my shoulders like something solid and final. He locked the latches at my collarbone, sealing the helmet into the neck dam. The moment it locks, the outside world disappears. You don't hear waves anymore. You don't hear the wind or deck crew. You hear your own breathing, loud and constant, and you hear the comms speaker crackle by your ear. "Comms check," my supervisor said through the line. "How do you read me, buddy?" "Loud and clear," I answered. My voice sounded tight and nasal inside the helmet, like it always does. Gas flow is green, hot water is pumping. You are clear to drop, he said. I stepped off the edge of the stage and sank into the water. The first part of a descent is always almost peaceful. The water is brighter and bluer near the surface. You can still see the ship's hull above you, and the bubbles rising from your exhaust valve. You can still pretend, for a moment, that you're just swimming. Then the light starts to die. At 50 feet, the blue fades toward green. The temperature drops hard. I felt hot water begin to flood through the suit's lines, fighting the cold that was trying to bite through the rubber. That warmth is one of the few comforts you get down there, and you learn to respect it. By 100 feet, the green darkened. By the time I passed that, it turned into a black that didn't feel natural. It wasn't like being in a dark room. It was like being in a void. There was no glow, no moonlight, nothing. I reached up and clicked on the halogen headlamp mounted on my helmet. The beam cut into the water and lit up a thick soup of sediment and floating particles. But it only reached about 10 feet before the darkness swallowed it. Passing 150, my supervisor said, "Pneumo gauge is steady. Take it slow." At 200 feet, you can feel the weight above you, even through the suit. It presses on your joints. It pushes against your chest. Everything is harder, slower, heavier. My lead-weighted boots hit the bottom. The seafloor was soft gray mud. The moment I stepped down, a huge cloud of silt exploded up around me and wiped out what little visibility I had left. For a few minutes, I couldn't see anything at all, not even the end of my light beam. On the bottom, I reported, depth is 200. Copy, pipeline should be about 20 feet ahead. Head bearing 040. I turned and started trudging through the mud. Every step was effort. The umbilical dragged behind me, rising up into black water toward the surface. You can't see it, but you feel it tug when it catches on the bottom, and you learn to move in a way that protects it. Soon, the pipeline appeared in my headlamp, a massive steel curve half buried in silt and covered in marine growth. It looked like a piece of a highway dropped into the deep ocean. I found the damaged section. A tool basket had been sent down ahead of me with my welding torch, grinding tools, and the steel patch. I dragged everything into position, clamped the grounding lead to the pipe, and set up my work area. Underwater welding is intense in a way that's hard to explain if you've never done it. When you strike the arc, the water explodes with bright green-white light. For a moment, everything around you becomes visible. The mud, the particles, your own hands. Then it's dark again when you stop. You have to focus on the molten metal puddle, even though you're cold, under pressure, and working blind half the time. For the first hour, everything went exactly according to procedure. I ground down the cracks, positioned the heavy patch plate, and started welding. The buzz of the torch and the hiss of my breathing gas turned into a rhythm. I got into that zone where you stop thinking about anything else. Then I noticed the taste. Commercial diving gas has a taste you get used to. It's stale and dry. It tastes like compressed air, rubber, and a faint trace of machine oil from the compressor's topside. It's not pleasant, but it's normal. But as I finished my second welding pass, the air changed. It tasted sweet, not mildly sweet, not maybe I'm imagining it. It was a heavy, thick sweetness, like sugar melted into syrup, like vanilla frosting. It coated my mouth and throat. It lingered in my lungs after I exhaled. I stopped welding immediately. I powered down the torch. The bright welding light vanished, and the world shrank back into the small circle of my headlamp. I took another breath. The sweetness was still there, stronger now, cloying. "Topside," I said, pressing the comms button with my chin. "Topside, do you read?" "Go ahead," my supervisor replied. His voice sounded normal. "Check the gas mix on the panel," I said. "Are the compressor filters running clean? The air down here tastes weird." There was a pause while he checked. I could hear faint background noise from the control room on the ship. "Gauges are all green," he said. "O2 levels are perfect. Filters are clean. What does it taste like?" "Sweet," I said. "Like sugar." Copy, that's unusual, but the mix is nominal. Depth is steady at 200. Are you feeling dizzy? Any signs of a hit? He was checking for narcosis. At depth, nitrogen can affect your brain like a drug. Divers call it the martini effect. It can make you feel calm, reckless, euphoric, confused. It can make you do stupid, deadly things. I ran quick checks the way I was trained. Thumb to each finger, 1 through 4. Simple motions, simple thoughts. I didn't feel drunk. I didn't feel dizzy. No, I said. I feel fine. Just a weird taste. I'll keep working. Let me know if the panel changes. Will do. Keep an eye on it. Let me know if you feel fuzzy. I picked up the torch again, but I didn't strike the arc, because right then I did start to feel fuzzy. It came on fast, like someone dropped a heavy blanket over my mind. Warmth spread through my body. The bitter cold of the ocean stopped mattering. The pressure stopped feeling threatening. The helmet didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt comfortable, safe, like being tucked in. And then the euphoria hit. I'm not talking about being in a good mood. I'm talking about an intense, unnatural happiness that didn't match anything around me. I felt like smiling for no reason, like everything was fine, like the black ocean and the crushing weight were beautiful. A small, clear part of my brain cut through and said, very calmly, "This is bad. This is narcosis. You need to tell Topside to pull you up." I opened my mouth to speak. That's when I saw movement beyond the edge of my headlamp beam. In that green-black water, where my light faded into nothing, something shifted, not like drifting debris. This had purpose. It moved with intention. I turned my helmet toward it and swept the beam across the seafloor. A shape floated a few yards away. At first, I thought it was a huge jellyfish. Then my brain rejected that explanation because the size was wrong. The shape was wrong. It was massive, roughly the size of a small car, and almost completely transparent. It glowed faintly on its own, with a sick pale light, like it carried its own dim moon inside it. It didn't have a clean outline. It looked like a floating membrane of clear gelatin, pulsing slowly in the freezing water. Then I saw what hung below it. Dozens of thick, clear tendrils dangled from the central mass. They weren't delicate like jellyfish tentacles. They were thick, like industrial cables, and they moved like muscles. They curled and uncurled with slow, deliberate control. The drugged, happy part of my mind kept insisting it was beautiful, like an angel drifting through the deep. The rational part of me was trying to scream. I watched as it drifted, silent and calm, toward my umbilical cord. That line is your life. You protect it the way you protect your own airway. You don't let it snag, twist, or kink. You do not let anything touch it. The creature approached the umbilical. Several tendrils reached out and wrapped around the hose bundle smoothly, almost gently. I felt the tug immediately, a real pull at the back of my helmet as the line tightened. The tendrils began to constrict. They tightened around the umbilical like a fist closing. And then I saw something extend from them. Sharp, translucent barbs, like clear hooks pushing out of the tendrils and piercing into the heavy, reinforced rubber of my gas hose. The moment those barbs punctured the line, the sweetness in my helmet exploded. It went from strange to overwhelming. My lungs filled with it. My head swam. My vision fractured into colors. The light from my headlamp turned into a weird kaleidoscope. My knees gave out and I sank into the mud, bumping against the pipeline. The welding torch slipped from my hand. "Topside," I tried to say, but it came out thick. "Topside, pull me. Pull me up." The radio answered with static, a harsh hiss that filled my helmet. "Topside?" I mumbled again, struggling to focus. The static cleared, and a voice spoke into my ear. "Honey?" I stopped breathing for a second. My heart felt like it locked. It was my wife. Not a distorted transmission, not something half-heard through interference. It was clear, clean, intimate. It didn't even sound like it was coming through the comms speaker. It sounded like she was right there inside the helmet with me, close enough to touch. "Honey, are you there?" she asked, soft and concerned. My wife died 3 years ago. She died in a hospital bed after a long, ugly illness. I held her hand. I watched her fade. I buried her. I stood in the rain and watched dirt cover the casket. That grief never left me, and it was part of why I stayed in this line of work. The deep ocean felt like the only place that matched the weight I carried around in my chest. I closed my eyes, and the euphoria twisted with that grief in a way that made it almost unbearable. "I'm here," I whispered. Tears filled my eyes instantly. "I'm right here." "I missed you so much," she said. The details of her voice were perfect. The pacing, the warmth, the tiny hesitations. Every small human thing my brain remembered. "I missed you too," I said. My voice sounded broken. Then her tone changed. She sounded urgent. "You need to be careful," she whispered. "The people up there, the ones on the ship, they're hurting you." "What?" I asked, confused, struggling to hold on to logic. "The helmet," she said. "The hose. They're pumping poison down to you. Can't you taste it? It's burning my lungs. It's hurting me." I took a breath, and beneath the sweetness, my brain suddenly noticed something else. A harsh, burning bite in my throat. Like chemicals, like my airway was narrowing. It felt real. It felt immediate. "They're trying to kill us," she pleaded. "They want to keep us apart. Please, honey, please take the helmet off. I want to see your face. I want to touch you. Take it off, and you can breathe the clean water. We can be together. Okay?" I whispered, like a child agreeing to something they don't even understand. "I'm coming." I lifted my hands to the collar of my helmet. Commercial diving helmets are designed to stay on. They lock into the neck dam with a heavy brass collar. There are safety pins at the front that keep the locking mechanism from being opened accidentally. There's also a safety system that alerts topside if a diver messes with the helmet seal. But in that moment, under that sweet, warm, syrupy fog in my mind, it didn't feel like a safety system. It felt like a barrier between me and the only thing I wanted. I reached for the first pin. My fingers were clumsy inside the thick gloves. "That's right," my wife's voice said, soothing. "Just pull the pins. I'm right outside. I'm waiting for you." I grabbed the metal ring on the first safety pin and yanked. It slid free with a solid metallic click. I dropped it into the mud. "One more," she whispered. "Just one more, and then turn the collar. It'll be so easy. It won't hurt, I promise. It'll just be like falling asleep in my arms." I reached for the second pin. And then a violent burst of static exploded in my ear, so loud it hurt. "What the hell are you doing?" someone screamed. It was my supervisor, and he wasn't using the calm voice supervisors use when everything is under control. He was panicking. "Stop touching your hat. Get your hands off your neck. Damn right now." For a split second, his voice cut through the fog. My hand froze over the second pin. "Don't listen to him," my wife's voice snapped, suddenly angry and desperate. "He's lying to you. He's poisoning you. Pull the pin. Pull it." I gripped the ring of the second safety pin and started to pull. Halfway out, I hovered there, one motion away from breaking the seal. If I pulled that pin and turned the collar, 200 feet of water pressure would slam into the helmet instantly. The air in my lungs would be crushed out. My lungs would fill with salt water. I'd drown before I could even understand what was happening. "I'm coming," I whispered to her. And then my supervisor roared, louder than anything I've ever heard through comms. Emergency blow-up. Topside had been watching my depth and my breathing. He saw me reaching for the latches and realized I was about to kill myself. He did the only thing he could do to stop me. On the surface, in the control room, he slammed open the primary gas supply valve to maximum. A violent surge of compressed air blasted down the umbilical like a train coming through a tunnel. The sound in my helmet was deafening, a roar you could feel in your bones. The regulator couldn't handle that volume. It went into free flow. Air flooded into my helmet and then into my suit. In less than a second, the dry suit ballooned to full inflation. turning me into a rigid, air-filled shape with my arms and legs forced straight out. I couldn't bend my elbows. I couldn't reach my helmet. I couldn't keep my hands on the pin. The buoyancy hit like an explosion. My boots were useless. The inflated suit ripped me off the seafloor and launched me upward. I shot into the black water like a torpedo, rising far too fast, blind and helpless, rocketing toward the surface. As I flew up, the umbilicals snapped taut above me. The creature was still wrapped around the hose bundle. Its barbs were still sunk into the rubber. When my body surged upward, the force transferred straight into that line and into whatever was gripping it. The tendrils tightened. The hoses stretched. I could feel the strain as vibration through the system. Then, with a sick, tearing sensation that I felt all the way in my helmet, the umbilical ripped free from the creature's grip. The clear barbs tore out of the rubber like hooks being yanked from flesh. As I tore past, my headlamp swept across the creature's central mass. I was only a few feet away, close enough that my brain registered details I will never forget. Inside the pulsing, glowing jelly, suspended in the center of it like something stored, was a human face, a man. His eyes were wide open, milky white, dead. His skin was pale and bloated, preserved in the clear fluid. Thick, clear veins or tubes ran from the creature into the man's neck and temples like he was wired into it. His mouth hung open slightly, like he'd been caught mid-breath. Then I was past it. The darkness swallowed it again. My ascent was a death sentence on its own. Going from 200 feet to the surface in seconds is catastrophic. As pressure dropped, nitrogen in my blood expanded into bubbles. The air in my lungs expanded too. I screamed and forced air out as hard as I could so my lungs wouldn't rupture. My whole body lit up with pain before I even broke the surface, like my veins were filling with broken glass. This was severe decompression sickness. The bends, but extreme. I hit the surface in an explosion of foam. My bloated suit kept me floating like a cork in rough water. I was screaming without meaning to. The pain was so intense it didn't even feel human. I heard shouting. The ship was right there. Deck crew reached out with boat hooks, caught the harness on my suit, and hauled me in fast and rough. I slammed onto the steel deck, thrashing, vision going dark at the edges. I could feel something tearing inside me. They didn't waste time. My tender grabbed me and dragged me across the wet deck toward the hyperbaric decompression chamber. It's a heavy steel cylinder with a door like a submarine hatch. They shoved me inside, threw my helmet in with me, and slammed the door shut. The locking dogs clanked into place. The chamber started hissing as they pumped it down, rapidly increasing pressure to push the nitrogen bubbles back into solution before they stopped my heart or caused a stroke. The pressure climbed. My ears hurt. The pain in my joints slowly began to back off, changing from sharp agony into a deep, sick ache. I lay on the chamber floor, shaking hard, exhausted beyond anything I can describe. The intercom crackled. "We got you, buddy," my supervisor said. He sounded shaken. His voice wasn't steady. "We blew you down to 160. You took a massive hit. You'll be in the chamber for a few days. But you're alive." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I stared at the steel ceiling and tried not to think about what I'd almost done. "What happened down there?" he asked. "The system showed you reaching for your latches. You were going to pop your hat at 200 feet. Why would you do that?" I looked at the speaker and thought about the sugar taste, the warmth, the impossible happiness, the voice of my wife, perfect and close, begging me to open the helmet so we could be together. And I thought about that dead man's face inside the translucent thing. "I don't know," I lied, because I didn't know what else to do. Narcosis. The mix must have been bad. I panicked. I lost my mind. There was a long pause. "All right," my supervisor finally said. "Quieter. Just rest. Company doctors are watching your vitals. We're going to bring you up slow." That was a week ago. The doctors say I'll survive, but I might have permanent joint pain. The company safety people have interviewed me again and again. Their conclusion is that it was my fault. Officially, my regulator malfunctioned and caused a temporary flow restriction. They claim that led to acute hypoxia and severe nitrogen narcosis, and that I hallucinated and tried to remove my gear. They're terminating my contract the moment I'm cleared and I step out of this chamber. I agreed to all of it. I signed the preliminary reports. I'm not fighting them. I don't want a hearing. I don't want to be the guy who tells a story that makes everyone stare at him in silence. I just want off this ship. I want solid ground under my feet again. I am never going near the ocean again. I'm typing this on my phone using the ship's Wi-Fi because I know other divers will read it. People who work in the deep black and trust their umbilicals and the calm voice topside. People who go down there alone and do their jobs like the ocean is just another work site. If you're down there and your air suddenly tastes like sugar, pay attention. If you feel a sudden warm wave of happiness that makes the freezing dark feel safe, do not trust it. And if you hear the voice of someone you love coming through the radio, do not move your hands toward your helmet. Keep them at your sides. Close your eyes. Force yourself to think of procedure. Even if you're shaking, even if you're crying, even if it feels like the one thing you want is right outside the glass. Scream for topside to pull you up immediately, because the person you love is not down there in the dark, but something else is. Story 2. I'm still trying to calm down after what happened. I figured this was the best place to lay it all out, to line up the details while they're still clear and try to make sense of it. I never thought I'd be in a situation like this, and honestly, I'd prefer there never be a next time. But if there is, I'll be smarter. I have to be. This was last Thursday as I'm writing this. It was after work and I was on the bus ride home. By the time I finally got off, I was running on that tired kind of relief where your body hurts but you're happy because you're done for the day. I stood there for a second on the sidewalk, watching the bus pull away with dust and fumes trailing behind it. And I looked up at my apartment building. It's a small, run-down complex. If you've lived in one, you know the type. The kind of place where the paint is given up, the railings feel slightly loose, and every hallway smells like old carpet and someone else's cooking. But that night, with my legs aching and my shoulders heavy, it looked almost welcoming. Even the little steps at the entrance, the ones I trip over in the mornings, looked like a red carpet leading straight to my sofa. I covered my mouth with my hand out of habit as the bus fumes drifted past, then walked to the front door. The top step is uneven, like someone took a chunk out of it years ago and nobody ever fixed it. I hopped over it instead of stepping on it, not caring if anyone saw me. I was not ending up face down on the floor for the second time that day. A few keys rattled, a couple of hard pushes, and I got through the main door. The landlord calls it a door like it's something to be proud of, but it's basically an old slab of wood that only stays in place because gravity is doing most of the work. I checked the communal mailboxes on the way in. Nothing exciting. A bill, a couple flyers for new takeout places, and a notice about roadworks from the council. The kind of mail that reminds you you're alive, mostly because it costs money to be. Then I climbed the stairs to the first floor. The motion sensor light clicked on as I stepped onto the stairwell, that loud little click that always sounds too sharp in a quiet building. Somewhere above me, I heard a door slam. A second later, raised voices. An argument, heated and familiar in that way apartment arguments are. I sighed while unlocking my door. It wasn't unusual for some of my neighbors to get loud, but I always thought the guy upstairs was pretty calm, and I was almost sure the noise was coming from his unit. I stepped into my apartment and pulled the door toward me. That's when I realized something was wrong. I didn't hear the usual clunk of the lock catching. My door is supposed to lock automatically when it shuts. It's an old mechanism, levers and gears and one sad little spring that looks like it's been fighting for its life for decades. Normally you unlock, you go in, you shut the door, and it locks behind you. That's the one thing I've always relied on because the building itself doesn't exactly give secure vibes. I turned back and looked at the lock, frowning. The spring was popped out, like it had slipped out of place or just decided it was done. I messed with it for a second, turning it like I had any idea what I was doing, and then I did what every tired person does. I blamed the most obvious piece and hoped force would solve it. I slammed the door hard. It shut properly, but it still wouldn't lock. I tried again. I jiggled the handle. I pressed my shoulder against it and pushed. Nothing. It stayed closed, but it didn't lock. I stood there with my keys in my hand, feeling that tired irritation start to rise, because I already knew what this meant. Another call to the landlord. Another cheerful promise that he'd get right on it, followed by days of nothing. I decided I'd deal with it tomorrow. That choice feels stupid now, but in that moment, I was too exhausted to care. I told myself the main entrance downstairs would keep out anyone who didn't belong there. I told myself one night with an unlocked apartment door wouldn't kill me. I told myself I just needed to get through the evening and sleep. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of something cold and bubbly, and carried it into the living room like I'd earned it. I sank onto my couch, kicked off my shoes, and put my feet up. It felt good enough that I actually laughed a little, just a short, quiet sound of relief. For a moment, I felt like the most comfortable man alive. I turned on the TV and took a few drinks. I wasn't even paying attention to what was on. I just liked the noise. I liked not moving. I liked the sense that my day was done. Then I heard a crash from upstairs. It snapped me out of my slump and made me stare at the ceiling, suddenly alert. I listened hard. A few seconds passed, then silence. My forehead creased with worry, and my hand went toward my pocket like I was going to grab my phone. Before I could, I heard my neighbor's voice, muffled but clear enough to understand. "Clumsy, you stupid bastard. Be more careful next time." That was a gift. I relaxed a little. I pulled my hand away from my phone and let it rest on my stomach. A violent argument would have been one thing. An accident and someone yelling about it didn't feel like my problem. I wasn't going to ruin my evening because someone upstairs couldn't watch their feet. I settled back down, kept drinking, let the TV keep talking at me. Relaxed, sleepy, content. And then, at some point, I fell asleep without meaning to. I woke up like you wake up from a nap you never planned to take. Confused, sweaty, limbs tangled, your brain trying to figure out what day it is and where you are. I remember snorting as I jolted upright because I hadn't woken up slowly. I'd heard a scream. At least I thought I had. For a few seconds I couldn't tell if it was part of a dream or something real. My breathing was fast, my heart was pounding. I forced myself to slow down and listen, trying to get my bearings. It was dark. I hadn't even realized how long I'd been asleep. The TV had shut off on its own, so it had to be late. I pulled my phone out and the screen lit up the room like a flashbang. 2:45 a.m. I'd been out for a long time. And then I noticed my shirt. I'd spilled my drink all over myself. The fabric was damp and cold against my skin. That annoyed me more than it should have. Maybe because it felt unfair, like even my relaxation had found a way to punish me. I picked up the bottle. It was empty now. I sat up, muttering under my breath, still listening for any sound that would confirm whether that scream had been real. I kept thinking, was it a dream? Was it a dream? I couldn't even remember what I'd been dreaming about. I just knew my shirt was soaked and my sleep was ruined. I stood up slowly, joints creaking. And that's when I heard it again. A scream, loud and raw and real, tearing through the building like it came from inside the walls. I froze instantly. The bottle was in one hand, my phone in the other. My mind went blank for a second, like my brain couldn't process it. One heartbeat, then another, then another. I stood there not moving because moving would mean making this real. Then I heard a click. The motion sensor light in the communal stairwell turned on. My whole body went cold. I realized two things at once. Someone was out there in the stairwell, and my door was unlocked. I moved without thinking. I stumbled into the hallway and rushed to the door, wanting to get my body against it before whoever was out there reached me. I slammed my shoulder into it and leaned my full weight against the wood, breathing hard, listening to the other side. Now that I know what I know, I think the noise I made drew him right to me, because almost immediately I heard footsteps outside, scraping steps on the cold stone floor, moving fast, closing in. Louder, louder, then nothing. The footsteps stopped right near my door. No breathing, no shifting, no small sound of someone deciding what to do next. Just silence, like the hallway outside was holding its breath. The stairwell light clicked off after a minute with no movement, and that should have told me something. It should have told me he wasn't moving because he didn't need to. But I didn't think that far. I pulled up my phone and dialed 999, still leaning my weight against the door. The operator answered. There was the usual back and forth location, what's happening, are you safe right now, do you know who it is? I gave them my address and told them I had heard screaming and someone was outside my door. They told me officers were on the way and that I needed to stay calm, stay on the line, don't do anything risky, keep doing exactly what I was doing. Here's where I admit something. I'm not a smart man, or at least I wasn't smart in that moment. Part of it was that I thought the phone call might scare anyone away. Part of it was that I'd been half asleep and my brain was still catching up. And part of it was that after a short stretch of silence outside my door, I convinced myself it was over. I did something stupid. I wish I hadn't. If I'd stayed inside, stayed quiet, stayed put, I might never have seen him. The police would have arrived. They would have handled it. I could have gone back to sleep and tried to pretend it was just a bad night. Instead, I opened my door, very slowly, inch by inch, just enough to slip my head and shoulder through. I leaned out carefully, trying not to move far enough to trigger the hallway light. I looked to the right, down the stairwell, and saw nothing but dim darkness. I turned my head left, and I almost lost control of my body. The stairwell light clicked on. I don't know if I moved too fast in panic or if the thing standing there shifted slightly and triggered it, but the light came on and suddenly I saw him clearly. A naked man was pressed against the wall less than a meter away from my door, completely nude, skin shiny with sweat, hairy, filthy, like he'd been living rough or rolling in something. His eyes were blown wide, pupils so large, they looked unreal. His jaw was clenched so hard I could see the muscles jumping. He was holding a knife in his right hand, and not a clean kitchen knife either. Something bigger, something meant for cutting meat. It looked used, recently used. He didn't speak. He just stared at me like he'd been waiting for me to open the door. I slammed it shut instantly and threw my weight back against it. The next second he hit it, not with his hands, not with one kick, but with his whole body. He slammed himself into my door like an animal trying to break into a cage. Again and again, the wood shuddering under each impact. The frame started to crack. I heard splintering. Each time he hit it, the door bent inward a little more, opening just slightly before snapping back. I leaned harder, my shoulder burning, my arms shaking. I didn't have long. I could feel my strength fading already, and he wasn't slowing down. If he got through, I don't want to imagine what he would have done to me. He wasn't just angry. He looked completely out of his mind. I looked around desperately, trying to find anything I could use. My first thought was to run to the kitchen and grab a knife, but one glance at the door convinced me I wouldn't make it in time. He'd be inside before I even reached the counter. Then I remembered I was still holding the empty bottle in my hand. It wasn't much, but it was something. And in that moment, a plan formed in my head that I can only describe as desperate and stupid, like I was trying to apply video game logic to real life. But it was better than standing there and waiting to get carved up. I listened to his rhythm. When he slammed into the door, he needed a couple seconds to step back and build momentum again. About 3 seconds between hits. I needed to time it so I didn't open the door right as he hit it, or I'd be the one taking the knife in the face. I waited, shoulders screaming, until I felt the brief pause. Then I moved. I pulled my weight off the door, flung the bottle into the living room as hard as I could, and stepped back behind the door frame. The second he crashed through the door, the bottle smashed against something in the other room with a loud crack, glass exploding. The door whipped open hard enough to slam into me and hurt like hell, but it kept my body hidden behind it. The man howled, a wild, furious sound. And then, like I'd actually gotten lucky for once, he sprinted into the living room, toward the noise. For half a second I saw his back as he ran. Then he vanished into the dark part of my apartment, still holding the knife. I didn't waste a second. I shoved past the broken door and launched myself into the stairwell. I ran down the stairs, skipping steps, nearly falling, landing hard at the entryway with my lungs burning. My hand hit the main door handle. Then I looked up. The stairwell is shaped so you can see through the gap between floors. If you look the right way, you can see up toward the top. That's when I saw him. He was leaning over the railing above, looking down at me, grinning. His mouth was frothy at the corners, like he'd been foaming or drooling. His eyes looked black under the stairwell lighting, wide and hungry. He looked like someone pretending to be human. I tried to scream, but all that came out was a strangled gasp. I yanked the main door open, hit the release on the lock, and stumbled outside. Behind me, I heard him charging down the stairs. Fear took over completely. I slammed the main door shut behind me and ran down the street, hopping over that same broken step without even thinking. The door behind me burst open with a crash, and he came out after me, moving fast, bare feet slapping the pavement. I turned my head to see how close he was, and that's when, for maybe the first time in my life, I felt gratitude toward my useless landlord. The man hit the misshapen step. In the dim light from the nearby street lamps, I saw him trip, his body pitching forward. He crashed down onto the pavement head first, making a sound I can't forget. He yowled as he fell, then went still. I kept running for a few more steps before I stopped and turned back, chest heaving. He was lying in the street with his back to me, hands tucked under him. For a moment, I just stared, waiting for him to twitch, to push up, to stand, and keep coming. He didn't move. I knew I was wasting time standing there, but my brain couldn't accept the sudden silence after so much violence. He'd been unstoppable seconds ago, throwing himself at my door like it was nothing. And now he was just still. The police arrived within minutes. They moved fast, lights flashing, voices sharp. They pulled me aside. They approached him carefully. Not long after, someone said he was dead. Massive bleeding in the brain from the fall, they told me later. And on top of that, he had enough drugs in his system that even the officers speaking to me sounded stunned by it. My upstairs neighbor hadn't gotten anything close to a quick ending. They didn't tell me details, and I didn't push for them. I don't know exactly when the attack happened, only that it had to have been going on for a while. My other neighbors, people who admitted they heard screaming but didn't call anyone, didn't open their doors, didn't react, told me the screams started around 1 a.m. From outside, during my statement, I could see streaks on one of the windows facing the road. Dark, lumpy streaks. I kept glancing up at them without meaning to, like my eyes were stuck on the proof that it wasn't a nightmare. I still look at that window now when I get off the bus. I took the next day off work. I didn't care about the pay. I needed time to process it, and I needed sleep that didn't feel like a trap. I also called my landlord, and I didn't speak politely. I told him the lock had failed, and if he didn't fix it immediately, there was going to be another problem in that building, and it wouldn't end as neatly. I'm not proud of how I said it, but I was still shaking with leftover adrenaline. And fear makes you mean in a way you don't expect from yourself. A new lock is scheduled to be installed tomorrow. I didn't mention the broken entrance step, though. I don't think I ever will. I've gained a strange respect for that ugly chunk of uneven stone. It might be the best security measure in the whole place. So yeah, that's my advice now, for whatever it's worth. Be annoyed at the potholes and the cracked steps and the broken bits of infrastructure, all you want. But every now and then, one of them might be the only thing standing between you and someone who has no business being on your floor at 3 a.m. Story 3. I'm not really sure how to start this, or if this is even the right place to post it. Also, I'm terrible at spelling. So yeah, just warning you, I've been reading stories like this online for a while. And I kept telling myself I'd never be one of the people who had to write one. But something happened last night and I can't get it out of my head. I'm tired, I feel stupid even typing it out. And I know half the comments would probably be, "You scared yourself." Maybe I did. But I still need to say it somewhere, because keeping it in my head is making it worse. I'm from a small town in Utah. I'm not going to say exactly where, but it's the kind of place where nothing really happens and everything closes early. Dead roads, empty lots. You can drive for a long time at night and not see another car. It's quiet in a way that feels normal when you grow up in it. A few months ago, I started getting into urbex. Nothing extreme. I'm not out here breaking into high-security places or climbing skyscrapers. Mostly old houses, empty small buildings, places people forgot about. I like the feeling of finding something abandoned and trying to picture what it looked like when it was still being used. It's weirdly calming. You're alone, there's no noise, no pressure, no one expecting anything from you. Last night, I found an old factory. From what I could piece together online, it used to be some kind of steel-related place or maybe a warehouse. I'm not totally sure. The info was vague, like it had existed and then stopped mattering, and nobody bothered to write down what it actually did. Either way, it was huge compared to anything I'd done before. The kind of place you can see from the road and immediately feel like you shouldn't be able to just walk into it. I tried to get a few friends to come with me, but nobody was available. Some were busy, some didn't want to go, some just didn't answer. So I went alone. Yeah, I know that was dumb. I don't need anyone to lecture me about it. I'm already doing that to myself. It had rained earlier and everything outside was wet. The dirt around the building was dark and soft. The weeds were flattened, and the air had that cold, metallic smell it gets after a storm. But the thing that stood out most was how quiet it was. Not normal quiet, not "it's late and nobody's around" quiet. I mean dead quiet. I stood next to my car for a second with the engine off and listened, and there was nothing. No bugs, no wind, no distant highway sound. Not even that low background noise you usually don't notice until it's gone. It was like the whole area was holding its breath. I remember thinking that it felt off, and I almost got back in my car right then. I told myself I was being dramatic and that my brain was just building tension because I was alone at night. I grabbed my flashlight and walked toward the fence. There was a chain-link fence around part of the property. It wasn't exactly secure. No razor wire, no cameras that I could see, and sections of it were sagging. Getting over it wasn't hard. The main doors of the building were boarded up, so I walked around the back, staying close to the wall. The ground was slick with rain, and I had to be careful not to slip in the mud. I found a broken window near the ground. It was low enough that I could slide through, but not comfortably. I had to lie down and pull myself in on my back. The glass was mostly gone, but there were still sharp pieces in the frame. I scraped myself in a couple places and tore my sleeve a little. It stung, but it didn't feel like a big deal at the time. Inside, the place was worse than I expected. I've been in abandoned buildings before, and you usually see the same kind of mess. Broken glass, trash, maybe graffiti, maybe signs of people partying. This was all of that, but heavier. It wasn't just neglected. It looked like it had been actively used and then trashed. Like the building wasn't fully abandoned, more like it belonged to no one, but people still came through. Glass crunched under my shoes. There were piles of garbage, old plastic bags, cardboard scraps of fabric, random metal parts, and things I couldn't identify without touching them. The air smelled damp, rusty, and stale. I kept my flashlight low, and I don't even know why. I could have lit up the whole room. I had a strong flashlight, but something in me didn't want to make a big bright circle on the walls, like I didn't want to announce where I was, so I angled it down and used it more to see where I was stepping than to scan the space. The first area I moved through looked like a storage section. Shelving units had been knocked over, boxes were torn open and scattered. The space went back farther than I expected, and the darkness felt thick between the beams of my flashlight like it wasn't just empty air. After a bit of walking, I found a room that made my stomach drop a little, because it didn't feel like abandoned factory anymore. It felt like somebody had made it into a place to live. There was a mattress shoved into a corner, clothes were piled next to it, empty bottles were scattered around, some plastic, some glass. A few of the bottles had liquid left in them, and the color was wrong, yellowish, reddish, cloudy. I don't know what it was, and I didn't want to know. I didn't pick anything up. I just stood there, shining the light across the floor, trying to understand what I was looking at. That's also where I first noticed the writing. It wasn't a sentence or a message. It was just one word, over and over. Sam. At first I thought it was just a tag, like someone's name. People write their names everywhere. It's not unusual, but the way it was written didn't feel like normal graffiti. The letters were uneven and messy, like someone had painted them fast and angry. The paint looked dark red, and under my flashlight, it had a dull shine like it hadn't fully dried in some spots. Sam was on one wall, then again on the next. Smaller on one surface, huge on another, stretched across concrete. It was the same style each time, the same messy strokes. And what really bothered me was that some of it looked old and faded, and some of it looked newer, like it had been put there recently. It wasn't one person tagging once. It looked like someone kept coming back to write it again. I wasn't fully scared yet. It was creepy, but Urbex is full of creepy stuff. People do strange things in abandoned buildings. I told myself it was probably a squatter or a group of people messing around, or someone with a mental health problem who kept writing the same name. But while I stood in that room, I heard something shift behind me. It wasn't a big crash. It was a small sound, like weight moving on debris. My first thought was an animal, a rat, a raccoon, something like that. I didn't want to find out, so I backed out of the room and kept going. As soon as I stepped into the hall, I heard scratching for a second. Quick, light, like fingernails or something, dragging across the surface. It stopped right away. I told myself it was nothing again. A building settling, water dripping, an animal, anything that fit into the normal world. Still, I could feel myself getting tense. I kept exploring. There was a hallway where part of the ceiling had caved in and rain was dripping through. Plants had started creeping in from somewhere, thin and stubborn, and there was a slick patch of mud on the floor where water had pooled. It actually looked kind of beautiful, in a ruined way, like nature was slowly taking the building back. The light from my flashlight caught the falling drops, and the sound of water hitting the floor echoed softly. But around that area, the feeling changed. It wasn't a jump scare feeling. It was more like a pressure in the back of my mind, like I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, and the building knew it. I started turning around for no reason. I kept getting that someone is watching me feeling even though I couldn't point to any proof. Then I found a door with a small, dirty window set into it. I leaned in and looked through. The glass was grimy, but I could make out the outline of a room. There wasn't much in there. Just a chair in the center. One chair placed like it had been put there on purpose. Not shoved into a corner, not tipped over with everything else, not surrounded by trash. Just sitting there, facing slightly off-center. Like someone had arranged it. I stared at it for a full minute. I don't even know why. It didn't make sense, and the fact that it didn't make sense made it worse. My brain kept trying to invent reasons. Maybe someone dragged it in and left it. Maybe kids set it up for a photo. Maybe it was nothing. The door was locked or stuck. I tried the handle and it wouldn't move. I looked around, found a metal bar on the floor, and wedged it against the doorframe. I didn't want to force anything too loudly, but curiosity got the better of me. I pushed until something gave with a sharp pop. The moment the door opened, a smell hit me so hard I took a step back. Rot. Not just mold or wet wood. This was the heavy, sour smell of something decomposing. It filled my nose and stuck in the back of my throat. My eyes watered instantly. I didn't step all the way in. I just leaned into the doorway and aimed my flashlight across the floor. The chair in the middle of the room was an office chair, not a wooden one. It looked out of place, like it belonged in a normal building. The floor around it had dark stains. Not bright red, not fresh. Old marks dried into the surface like something had soaked into the concrete and never came out. I didn't want to think about what kind of stains they were. I shifted my weight and bumped the chair by accident. It rolled an inch and spun slightly. The wheels made a tiny grinding sound on the gritty floor, and as it turned, I noticed the stains weren't random. There were marks that curved around it, like something had been dragged in a circle. My skin went cold. Then I heard something outside the room. Just a step. One clear, careful step on debris. I froze so fast I felt my muscles lock. I held my breath and listened. Nothing else happened. No running. No more footsteps. Just silence again. I told myself it was the building, an animal, anything. I backed away and left that room quickly, not slamming the door but not trying to be quiet either. I just wanted distance from that smell, from that chair, from whatever feeling that room had. At that point, I decided I'd seen enough. I started heading back the way I came, and that's when I realized I didn't have my keys. I did that full-body panic check. Pockets, jacket, jeans, the small bag I brought. Nothing. My keys weren't on me. I stood there in the dark with my flashlight beam shaking on the floor, trying to remember the last time I'd felt them. I must have set them down somewhere without thinking. The only place that made sense was the room with the mattress, the one that looked like someone had been staying there. I remembered shifting my jacket and moving things around so I wouldn't step on bottles. That had to be where they were. So I went back. It didn't take long to reach the room again, but it felt longer. The building felt tighter, like the corridors had narrowed while I wasn't looking. When I got there, the door to that room was closed. I stopped in front of it and stared. I didn't remember closing it. I'm not saying it was impossible that I did. Maybe I pulled it shut without thinking. But I honestly couldn't remember doing it, and that bothered me more than it should have. The air in the hallway felt colder. My flashlight beam seemed weaker, like the darkness was pushing back. I opened the door. My keys were on the floor, right there, near the bottles, like they'd been placed there for me to find. I stepped in slowly, shining my light around. The mattress looked different, too. I swear there had been clothes on it earlier, a pile of fabric, something that made it feel lived in. Now it looked emptier, cleaner in a weird way, like someone had moved things around while I was gone. I tried to convince myself it was just the angle and the bad lighting, but the thought wouldn't stick. I bent down and grabbed my keys. The moment my fingers closed around them, I heard a crunch behind me. Not a random settling noise, not something falling in the distance. It was the unmistakable sound of something stepping on broken glass. I turned around fast enough that I almost lost my balance. My flashlight beam hit the doorway, then the floor, then the corners of the room. Nothing. No one. No animal. Just the same mess and the same red writing on the wall. Then I heard it. A sound that made my stomach drop straight through my body. It was laughter. Quiet, controlled laughter, like someone trying not to make noise but failing. Like they were right outside the light, close enough to hear my breathing, enjoying the fact that I couldn't see them. It lasted a couple seconds. Then it stopped. That was it for me. I didn't care what it was. I didn't care if it was a person messing with me, a squatter, a prank. All I knew was that I was alone in a huge building, and something was playing with how alone I was. I turned and started walking back fast toward the window I'd come through. Behind me, I heard another step, closer than before. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to give it the satisfaction of seeing my face in the flashlight beam, and I didn't want to lose time. I kept going. I heard that quiet laugh again, softer this time, like it was right behind me. Then another crunch of glass. I broke into a run. The hallway blurred in my flashlight beam. My shoes slipped once on a wet patch, and I caught myself on the wall, smearing my hand through grime. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just headed for the broken window like it was the only real thing left in the whole building. When I reached it, I dropped to the ground and shoved myself through as fast as I could. It wasn't graceful. My jacket snagged on the frame and I felt glass scrape my skin again. But I got out. I stood up on the outside and turned back for a split second. Inside near the window, I thought I saw something move. Not a clear shape, just movement, like a person pulling back into the darkness. My flashlight beam shook, and for a moment it looked like the dark itself shifted. It could have been shadows, it could have been my brain, it could have been anything. I didn't stay to confirm it. I ran to my car, got in, locked the doors, and started the engine with shaking hands. I didn't even sit there to breathe. I just drove. I kept looking in my rearview mirror like I expected to see headlights behind me, even though that made no sense. I told a couple people today, and they basically said what I expected, that I freaked myself out because I was alone, and that old buildings make weird noises, and that I probably heard an animal. Maybe they're right. I want them to be right, but I can't stop thinking about that name everywhere in the building. Sam. I tried searching again this morning, and there's not much, just the same vague info about the property. But I did find one old forum post from years ago that mentioned the same place. It was short, like the person didn't want to say too much, but it said something like, "If you see Sam, don't stay after you hear it." It could be someone messing around online. It could be a local joke. It could be nothing at all. But it lined up with what happened to me too neatly. And here's the part that makes me feel even more ridiculous. When I grabbed my keys last night, I didn't really look at them. I just picked them up and got out. But right now in my room, under normal light, there's a small red mark on the side of my key. Not on the keychain, not on the plastic, on the metal itself. I don't remember that mark being there before. It could be rust. It could be something from the factory. It could be paint. It could be dried dirt. I keep telling myself it's just a normal mark from being dropped on the floor of a filthy building. Still, every time I look at it, I think about those red letters on the wall. I think about the chair in the room that smelled like rot. I think about the sound of something stepping on glass behind me when there was nothing there. And I think about that laugh, quiet, close, like it didn't need to chase me because it already knew I was going to run. I'm exhausted, honestly. I didn't sleep much. If anyone here knows anything about an old factory like this in Utah, or if you've been in a place where the same name is written everywhere like that, tell me. I'm not saying it was paranormal. I'm not even saying it wasn't just a person trying to scare me. I just want to know if this Sam thing is something other people have run into. I don't think I'm done with Urbex, but I'm definitely not going back there alone again. And I'm not going back to that factory at all. Not after last night. Not after what I heard. Story 4. The signal out here isn't great, and I'm not even sure why I'm still trying to explain this to anyone. But I can't keep it in my head anymore. I've tried to do this the normal way. I tried to get proof. I tried to get help. I tried to get someone official to take me seriously. All I ended up with was over 100 photos of an empty sky. I went to the doctor. They said I was fine. I got laughed at by the RCMP and by my own family. And everyone else just gives me that look, the one that says they're waiting for you to stop talking before they decide how far away from you they should stand. So I'm writing this as a last attempt to keep myself sane. If I put it in order, if I keep the facts straight, maybe I won't start doubting my own memory. Or maybe someone out there has heard something like this before and can tell me what it is. Something was parked over our town for 2 full months, and no one but me noticed it. I live in a small town in northern British Columbia. Really small, around 5,000 people. The kind of place where you recognize trucks by the dents in them and where the grocery store cashier knows what you buy without looking at the screen. We're surrounded by woods, big sky, long winters. The sort of town where you can stand outside at night and hear nothing but the quiet. Up here, weird things happen sometimes. People see strange lights in the trees or claim they heard something moving in the bush that wasn't an animal. People tell stories about what they saw on back roads or out on the lake. Most of it gets shrugged off and turned into a joke later. This wasn't like that. This wasn't a story you can laugh at because you can always tell yourself it was just the angle of the light or a trick of distance. This was right there, sitting over the town like it belonged. It started on a normal Wednesday. I was on my way to pick up my son from kindergarten. I got to the school a bit early, like I always do, so I was parked and waiting for the last bell. I remember looking at my phone, checking the time, doing nothing important. Then I got this sudden urge to look up. You know how an intrusive thought feels? Like something in your head taps you on the shoulder and won't stop until you do it at once. That's what it felt like. Not curiosity, not, oh, look at the clouds. More like a strong push. So I looked up. Clear blue sky. Not a lot of clouds. Bright enough that the whole world looked clean. I started to look back down at my phone, and that's when I noticed something in my peripheral vision. Something that didn't match the sky around it. So I looked up again, focusing on the same spot. And there it was, just sitting there. The problem is, I don't have a clean description for it, because it was like it was both there and not there at the same time. You could see through it, but you still knew it was there. The best way I can explain it is that the air bent around it, like light, or reality itself warped slightly in that one spot. It wasn't shiny, it wasn't flashing, it didn't have lights. It didn't look like any aircraft I've ever seen. It didn't even look solid. It looked like a distortion, like the sky had been stretched over something and couldn't sit flat. I remember thinking it was odd, but I didn't feel fear right away. It didn't feel like danger. It felt like something I didn't have time to think about. The bell rang. Kids poured out. My son ran to the truck. We went home, and I honestly didn't think about it again that day. Not until the next morning. Thursday morning, dropping my kid off, I looked up without even meaning to. It was still there, same place, same patch of sky, like it hadn't moved an inch. That's when doubt hit. Not doubt about it being real. More doubt about me. I actually wondered if something was wrong with my eyes, or if I was sick, or if exhaustion was making me see things. I didn't have time to spiral, though. I was already close to being late for work, so I got back in the truck and drove off. My ex-wife picked our son up that afternoon, so when I got home, I asked her about it. I tried to keep it casual. I asked if she'd noticed anything strange about the school lately, anything that looked like a weird shape in the sky. She gave me a confused look immediately. I pushed a little harder, tried to explain what I meant, but she just shook her head and told me I was probably stressed, that I'd been working too much, that I needed to sleep. But the next day, it was still there. Friday morning, I stood in the parking lot a little longer than I should have, staring up at that spot. This time, I forced myself to really look, really pay attention. Like attention would turn the distortion into something solid. A few things stood out. First, it didn't make any sound. Nothing. Not a hum, not a distant engine, not a shift in air. The town was quiet the way it always is in the morning, and this thing in the sky didn't add anything to the soundscape. Second, it was big. Not tiny dot high up. Big. Big enough that if it had been solid, it would have been obvious to anyone. It was shaped like an almond or an eye, and it looked about the size of the school building if you laid the school up there in the sky. Third, there were no real details. No panels, no windows, no lights. Just that distortion, that bending of the background around its edges. I left for work almost late again, and the whole drive I couldn't stop thinking about it. What is it? What does it do? Is it real? Or am I finally losing my mind and the thought that kept punching its way through everything else was the simplest one? Why is it over my kids' school? My first instinct was to call the RCMP. I told myself they'd at least send someone to take a look. But when I called, I got the kind of response you get when someone has already decided you're wasting their time. A little laugh in the voice, a tone that says, "Sure, buddy." They didn't say it outright, but they made it clear they weren't taking it seriously. I tried again with my ex-wife. Same thing. She started looking at me like I was becoming a problem. It stayed there for almost a week, and there wasn't a thing I could do about it. I tried to get evidence. I stood in the parking lot and took photos. I zoomed in until the image turned grainy. I tried different angles. I tried different devices. Every time when I checked the photos, I had nothing but blue sky, not even a blur, not even a hint of distortion. It was like cameras couldn't see it. I borrowed my brother-in-law's infrared scope, the one he uses for hunting. I thought maybe it would show heat or cold or something different from the background. Nothing. No signature. No change. Up until then, I'd been afraid of what it was. Now I started being afraid of what it meant that nobody else could see it. I started wondering if I'd slipped into psychosis, if this was the beginning of me breaking. So I went to the hospital. They ran tests. They asked questions about stress, sleep, work, substances. They checked my eyes. They checked my basic health. In the end, they told me I was fine, perfectly fine. Walking out of there felt worse than walking in. Because if I was fine, then what did that leave? What do you do when you're sure something is real, but the world refuses to confirm it? Then Monday morning came. I dropped my kid off and looked up automatically, bracing myself for it. It was gone. The relief hit me so hard it felt like a physical thing. Like someone had pulled a heavy coat off my shoulders. I drove to work feeling lighter than I had in days. For the first time, I even considered that my ex-wife might have been right. Maybe it was stress. Maybe I'd been fixating on a weird cloud pattern. Maybe I'd scared myself. It was my ex's turn to have our son that day. I got off work around 8 that evening and decided, honestly, to celebrate. Not a party, just a good meal. I wanted a steak. So I drove to the local co-op. I wasn't even fully into the parking lot when I slammed on the brakes. There it was. Hanging over the grocery store, my stomach dropped so hard it felt like it hit the floor of my truck. It hadn't disappeared. It had moved. I sat there gripping the wheel, staring up through the windshield. Same distortion, same impossible shape, same feeling of the sky bending around it. Only now it wasn't over the school. It was over the co-op, like it had changed targets. I told myself I couldn't handle this. Not again. So I tried to act normal. I parked. I went inside. I forced myself to shop like it was an ordinary Monday evening. Inside the store, everything looked normal. People wandered the aisles. A couple chatted by the produce. Kids begged for candy. Someone complained about prices. Nothing, not one thing, suggested the sky outside was wrong. It took me maybe 10 minutes to grab what I needed. I went to the checkout, set my items on the belt. The cashier scanned 2 items. Then she stopped. Her hand rested on the package of steak like her body had frozen mid-motion. Her face went blank. Not confused, not startled. Blank, like someone had turned her off. Then she slowly looked up. My heart punched hard in my chest because I knew in that second that she was looking at it. And then a hum started inside my skull. That's the only place I can describe it. Not in the air, not in my ears, but in my head. It was like vibration, like someone pressed a powerful tool against the back of my skull and turned it on. I couldn't hear it in the normal sense, but I felt it in my teeth and behind my eyes. As quickly as it started, it stopped. The cashier blinked and went right back to scanning my groceries like nothing happened. No pause, no comment, no sign she just had an empty minute stolen out of her life. I asked her if she heard that hum. "What hum?" she said, completely serious. Then, like I was the weird one, she asked, "Cash or card?" I paid, grabbed my bags, and basically ran out to my truck. I nearly dropped my keys trying to unlock the door. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her face, that blank stare, the slow look upward, like she wasn't choosing to do it, like something was pulling her attention. Even I have to admit this is where I started sliding, obsessing, fixating. I couldn't leave it alone. I called in sick twice that week, just so I could watch it. I'd step outside every morning and look up, checking if it was still over the store. On the drive home at night, I'd go out of my way to pass the co-op just to see it again. It never moved, not once. Noon, midnight, rain, clear sky, it didn't matter. It sat there over that store like it was anchored. Then the next Monday came. I went outside first thing that morning and looked up. Nothing, it wasn't over the co-op. Last week, when it left the school, I felt relief. This time, the relief didn't come. Instead, I felt this cold curiosity, like my brain couldn't stop asking the question, where did it go? I called my boss and said I was sick again. He didn't sound happy, but I didn't care anymore. I got in my truck and started driving around town, scanning the sky, checking the spots where buildings stood out. The school, the arena, the church, the medical clinic, the hall. Eventually, I found it. It was hanging over the community hall this time. My mind immediately snapped back to what happened last Monday night. The hum, the cashier freezing, that slow, collective glance upward. I didn't know why, but I felt sure something happened when it moved. So I prepared. I grabbed snacks and water, parked across from the hall, and waited. Hours passed. It stayed there, silent, unchanged. People came and went down the street like it was any other Monday. Nobody looked up, nobody pointed, nobody even squinted at the sky like they felt something odd. As the last light of the day started to fade, it happened. The hum began again. I checked the clock in my truck, 8:21 p.m. At first, my body tensed like it had learned to fear the exact minute. The hum grew stronger, rattling in my teeth. 8:22 p.m., 2 cars on the road, literally the only other cars I could see, stopped dead in the middle of the street, not braking slowly, just stopped like someone pressed pause on them. Their engines kept idling, their headlights stayed on, but the cars didn't move. 8:23 p.m. The hum stopped. Both cars drove off like nothing happened. Smooth, normal, no hesitation. No one pulled over. No one got out. No one acted like they'd just lost time. And after that, the thing stayed over the community hall until the following Monday. That's when the pattern became obvious. Every Monday it moved to a different building. Then every Monday night, from 8:21 to 8:23, the hum would start. And it was like the town paused. In those 2 minutes, people would always look toward it. Not all at once like a movie, but enough that I could tell something was pulling them, like a silent command. And afterward, nobody remembered. Not my friends, not my neighbors, not my kid. When I tried to talk about it, I became the problem. I became the unstable one. My ex stopped letting me see our son because she thought I needed help. I can't even blame her. If someone came to me with this story and no proof, I'd probably think the same thing. The weeks after that were a spiral. I barely slept. I missed work. I got fired. I stopped being a person with a schedule and became a person with a mission. Track the thing, record the building, watch the clock, prove to myself I wasn't insane. I chased it from building to building for 5 weeks, every Monday finding it in a new place. Every Monday night, watching the town lose those 2 minutes. Then came the Monday of the 8th week. That morning, I did what I'd been doing. Made coffee, grabbed my journal, got ready to note where it moved to next. At first, I looked up and saw nothing. I turned to go back inside, and that's when I saw it. It was over my house. It just hung there, silent, the same impossible almond shape bending the sky around it. This might sound stupid after everything else, but that was the first moment I felt like it was looking back, like it wasn't just occupying space. It was aware. The idea of it being over my home made everything real in a new way. Public buildings are scary, sure, but you can leave them. You can walk away from the grocery store. You can drive away from the community hall. Your house is where you're supposed to be safe. I spent the day debating whether to pack up and leave town. Just run. Drive until the roads blurred and hope the thing didn't follow. But every time I thought about leaving, I thought about the clock hitting 8:21. and I felt sick. I didn't know what would happen this time, but I knew it would be different. I could feel it in my body like an instinct. In the end, I stayed. If there was ever a time to get answers, it was when it chose me. By 7 p.m., I started preparing like I was about to survive a storm. I locked every door. I blocked the windows so they couldn't be opened. I shut every blind. I moved a dining chair into my bedroom and positioned it so I had a clear view of the bedroom door. I dragged my bedside table in front of me like a barrier, even though I knew deep down it wouldn't stop anything. I positioned my old alarm clock so I could see it clearly without taking my eyes off the door. Then I turned the TV on, mostly for noise, mostly because silence felt like an invitation. I sat down. I checked the clock. 8:19 p.m., the next few minutes crawled. The TV talked, but the loudest sound in the room was the tick of the second hand. Tick, tick, tick. Each one felt like it took effort. Then it came. 8 hours, 20 minutes, and 59 seconds. The TV stuttered, like the image couldn't hold itself together. 8:21, the hum started, and everything paused. The TV froze on a frame like someone hit stop. The clock hand trembled at 8:21, shaking like it wanted to move forward, but couldn't. And me, my body locked. I couldn't move, not a finger, not my jaw, nothing. The closest feeling I can compare it to is sleep paralysis, except I was fully awake and sitting upright. It wasn't my body failing to wake up. It felt like something had grabbed time itself and held it still. The only thing I could move was my eyes. My heart hammered so hard I felt it in my throat. But even my breathing felt shallow and stuck, like my lungs didn't have permission to work properly. This had never happened before. Out in town, I'd felt the hum, seen people freeze, but I hadn't been trapped inside it like this. Then I heard my front door open downstairs. The sound hit me like ice water, because it meant the locks and blocks and preparation meant nothing. At first, there was silence, then dragging. It sounded like something hauling heavy sacks across my floor. Not one sack, more than one. The sound was wet and heavy, like the weight wasn't just fabric, like it had shape. I heard them enter, then split up. One went toward the living room, one moved toward the kitchen. And the dragging sound that made my stomach twist came toward the stairs. Two of them were coming up. My mind screamed at my body to move, to grab the rifle, to stand up, to run, to do anything. Nothing. I could only stare at my bedroom door and wait. The dragging got closer. One moved past my door and continued down the hallway toward the second bedroom. The other stopped right outside mine. Silence. Then a sharp click from the other side of my door. It's hard to describe that sound, but the closest comparison is the satisfying click of a pen, the way it snaps into place. Only this sounded wet. A moment later, another click came from the other bedroom. Then another one from downstairs. Whatever was outside my door clicked 2 more times, click, click. Then the doorknob turned. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would choke me. The door creaked open slowly, inch by inch. And it opened onto nothing. No person, no shape, no shadow. Just the empty, dark hallway. The next thing I knew, I could move again. The TV resumed like nothing had happened. The sound poured back into the room. My muscles jolted like I'd been released from a clamp. I looked at the clock. 8:23 p.m., 2 minutes gone. I grabbed my hunting rifle from under the bed and tore through the house, checking every corner, every room, every closet, shaking like my body didn't know how to stop being afraid. The windows were still shut and locked. The blinds were still closed, but my front door was slightly open. I stepped outside and looked up. The thing was gone. I got in my truck and drove around town, checking the sky like a maniac. Nothing. No distortion. No almond shape. No bending of light. It was gone completely. All week, I found myself staring at the sky, waiting, hoping, dreading. But no matter how long I looked, I never saw it again. Then Monday came again, and even after everything, curiosity dragged me back. I couldn't help it. I sat at my dining table with a stopwatch, staring at the stove clock and my phone, waiting for 8:21 like it was an appointment with something I hated. At exactly 8:21, I started and stopped the stopwatch as fast as my fingers could move, just to test myself, just to prove something. When I looked down, my heart sank. 2 minutes. I checked the stove clock. 8:23. I sat there for a long time, staring at the numbers, feeling sick. I know how this sounds. I know what it looks like on paper. But I'm done arguing with myself about whether I'm crazy. I'm done begging people to believe me. All I know is this. Every Monday at 8:21 p.m., me and everyone else in this town lose 2 minutes of our lives. And for 8 weeks, something in the sky chose where those 2 minutes happened. Story 5. My mom went missing in the summer of 2008. She disappeared one night. One moment she was part of my life, and then she was just gone. No goodbye, no note, no sign of a struggle that I ever saw with my own eyes. People use phrases like vanished into thin air, and I used to roll my eyes at that kind of wording, but that's the only phrase that fits what it felt like from inside our house afterward. I never said out loud that I thought she was kidnapped. I was a kid, but even then I had this strange superstition about words. Like speaking the worst thing would make it real, would lock it in. I didn't want to give that idea a place to live. I didn't want to say it and have the universe take it as permission. So I kept it in my head and tried to act like she could still come home at any time. Like the front door might open and she'd walk in and everything would snap back into place. The police did come. They talked to everyone. I mean everyone. Literally every single person in the 11 houses around ours got questioned. Neighbors I barely knew. People who didn't even like us. People who had lived there forever, and people who had just moved in. It felt like the whole street became a crime scene. Like our town had been lifted up and shaken to see what would fall out. I heard adults saying there had been other missing people in the area too. Not just my mom. I didn't understand what that meant at the time. I thought missing was something that happened in faraway places, in big cities, in scary stories. I didn't think it was something that could happen in a town where everyone recognized your car. At first, the police acted like they were going to solve it. They asked questions over and over, took notes, made phone calls. Then time passed. Leads dried up. The conversations changed. People stopped saying, "When we find her," and started saying, "If we find her," like they didn't notice the difference. Eventually, the police stopped coming by, and it became our job to keep her face alive on paper. Posters on poles, flyers in shop windows, her picture on photocopied sheets that curled at the corners when it rained. Later, much later, I found out my parents had divorced a month before she disappeared. Nobody told me at the time. Nobody sat us down and explained it. I just learned it as an adult through other people's words, like it was a normal detail that had accidentally been left out. It made me feel sick when I found out, because it meant the grown-ups around me knew things were falling apart even before she vanished. And they still let my sister and me keep living like we were in a normal family. I grew up in a small mountain town, the kind that looks beautiful on postcards and feels brutal in July. It was touristy because it sat along a highway that funneled people toward nearby national parks. In summer, the town would fill with strangers in hiking boots and clean shorts, people who looked excited to be there, people who treated our home like a stop on a trip. But for those of us who lived there, summer could be miserable. A lot of houses didn't have air conditioning. Ours didn't. July meant heat trapped inside the walls, the air thick and stale. It meant lying on top of sheets at night, sweating and turning, hearing cars go by with their windows down while you felt like you were melting. The summer after my mom disappeared, a heat wave hit our town. It wasn't just hot, it was relentless. The kind of heat that makes adults short-tempered and makes kids restless because there's nowhere to escape it. That summer was also the first time my sister and I were alone for most of the day. According to my dad, we were old enough, He had work. He had his own life. He told himself it was fine. If the neighbors had known how often we were alone, I think it would have raised eyebrows. But my dad didn't care much about what other people thought. And after my mom was gone, he seemed to care even less. My sister and I found ways to survive the heat like it was a game. We would fill plastic buckets with water, waddle out onto the porch, and dump them over our heads. Sometimes I would do it slower. I'd plug my nose, close my eyes, and dump my whole head into the bucket. The bright orange plastic would reflect in the water, and for a few seconds the world would turn into orange walls and shimmering light. I'd hold my breath until my lungs burned, staring at that glowing color like it could erase everything else. My sister and I turned it into competitions. Who could hold their breath longer? Who could stand in the sun longer before running back inside? I always won because I was older and because I liked the feeling of pushing myself. Looking back, I think part of me liked the pressure in my chest because it distracted me from the pressure that lived in my head after my mom vanished. When you're holding your breath, you can't think about anything else. One day, my dad took us up to Clover Falls. I don't remember how long the drive was, but it felt like hours, mostly because the car was hot and the seats were leather. My arms stuck to them with sweat. Every time I shifted, it felt like peeling tape off skin. My mom used to complain about those seats all the time. She hated them. She'd say they were uncomfortable and made you feel dirty even when you were clean. That day, in that heat, the memory of her voice came back so sharply it hurt. My dad, to his credit, did give us a safety talk. He wasn't the kind of man who acted afraid of much, but he did take the river seriously. He warned us that the current could pull you in if you got too close. He told us to stay in the side pools where the water was calmer. He said tourists drowned out there because they didn't know what they were doing. We were locals, though. We weren't that stupid. That's what we told ourselves. And that's what kids always believe right before they learn they're wrong. When we finally reached the spot, excitement hit me like electricity. That child-level thrill where your whole body feels lighter because you know what's coming. I remember being almost happy to be sweating because it made the idea of cold water feel even better. My dad pulled over on a random shoulder like he always did. He had this habit of finding places that didn't look like anything special from the road. And then suddenly, you'd be at a trail, or a view, or a hidden swimming spot. He could remember how to get to them without a map. At the time, I thought it was normal, just a dad thing. Now it strikes me as strange, because he couldn't remember birthdays, couldn't remember details about our lives, but he could give you exact directions to Clover Falls like it was carved into his brain. The walk down was miserable. The path was steep and dusty, littered with sticks and pine needles and little rocks. I was wearing bright blue flip-flops with pineapples printed on them. My mom had given them to me a few months before as a birthday gift, and I wore them constantly that summer. They were cheap and flimsy. The plastic strap kept popping out of the hole in the sole, and I had to jam it back in over and over. Every time it happened, I got more annoyed, but I refused to stop wearing them. They were one of the last things she gave me. The dirt path was full of things that slid under the foam and poked between my toes. I kept stopping to shake my feet out. Every other step, I'd lean on my dad, half for balance and half because I wanted him to feel responsible for how hard this was. My sister and I complained nearly the whole way down, whining loudly and dramatically the way kids do when they think it might get them sympathy. My dad kept promising that the river would be worth it. When the water finally came into view, I forgot how much my feet hurt. I saw the blue and I wanted it immediately. I was at that age where I was old enough to run ahead as long as I could still see my parents behind me, and I didn't think twice about it. I took off down the last part of the path. "Marin, wait," my dad shouted. I didn't stop. Right before the river, there was a drop-off, maybe 4 feet down. I grabbed a wilted bush and lowered myself carefully, feeling the leaves shake under my grip. I heard my dad again calling something about not going in too deep, but his voice came from far away, like it was already behind a wall. By the time I got to the water's edge, my dad had just climbed down and was helping my sister down. The river was a deep sapphire blue, the kind of blue that looks unreal in bright sun. It stood out against the red rocks behind it, the rock walls rising and catching the light. The surface glittered in places, tiny flashes like a gem. The main current rushed hard through the center, swirling and snapping against rocks. But along the side there were calmer pools where water collected and moved gently. I stepped into one of those pools and felt instant relief. Cold shot up my legs like a blessing. I didn't hesitate. I bent forward and shoved my head underwater, running the water through my hair. I savored every drop sliding down my neck and shoulders. That usual cautious feeling you get when you first enter water wasn't there. I wanted the cold more than I wanted safety. I lowered myself deeper until I was almost squatting. The water reached my stomach. It wasn't enough. I wanted more. I edged closer to the area where the current moved faster, even though I knew what my dad had said. In my head, I was still in control. I was just going to get a little closer, just enough to feel it tug. That's when my flip-flops started to slide. At first, it was a small pull, a gentle tug, like the river was teasing me. I curled my toes instinctively, gripping the foam. But the shoe was already halfway off my foot. Without thinking, I reached down with my right hand and grabbed it. The moment my fingers closed around the flip-flop, the river took me. It wasn't gradual. It was immediate, like a hand grabbing your wrist and yanking. I didn't even thrash at first, because my first thought was stupid and normal. My dad is going to kill me. I heard my sister scream, distant and sharp. My right arm went down into the water, still clutching the flip-flop like it mattered more than anything. My brain locked onto it. It felt like if I let go, I'd lose something important forever. My survival instinct didn't take over right away. The part of me that loved my mom, the part of me that didn't want to lose the last gift she gave me, held on like it was a lifeline. Then the current grabbed my right leg too, and the panic finally hit. That loud internal alarm that says you are in danger, you are dying, move now. My arms and legs started flailing. Water hit my face. The current twisted me. My right fist stayed clenched around the flip-flop. I couldn't bring my arm up. My body fought the water like an animal fights a trap, thrashing and twisting with no plan. My free hand reached for anything. It grabbed at water, at nothing. It slipped through my fingers. For a split second, everything slowed down, like time stretched. I heard my heart pounding, loud and heavy. Thump, thump, thum, ump. I saw my dad at the edge of the river with my sister. My dad had both arms extended, reaching for me. My sister's mouth was wide open, her face frozen in shock. I couldn't make out my dad's expression, but I could see the shape of him, the tension in his body. Then something yanked me down, not like a current, not like water pressure, like a grip. My arm was pulled so hard that my head went under with it, and my legs kicked up. The world flipped. Water rushed past my face and filled my ears. The river swallowed sound and replaced it with that muffled roaring you only hear underwater. And then I saw them. Eyes, 2, 4, 6. More than I could count. No eyelids, unblinking, staring straight at me. I couldn't focus on one face. My mind jumped between them, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. They weren't fish. They weren't animals. They were heads. Faces. Too many faces. Their teeth were black and pointed, like they'd been filed down. They looked stained and dirty, like old tile with mold growing in the cracks. The heads had no skin. The faces were hard and gray, jagged and wrong, like stone carved into something that only pretended to be alive. Their jaws looked broken in places, uneven and sharp. Some of them opened their mouths wide, unhinging, like snakes. When rocks tumbled in front of them, their mouths snapped shut hard, like a reflex. It looked like their jaws were forced open and forced closed, as if something was making them do it. I don't know how long I was under. Seconds, maybe, but it felt longer because fear stretches time. Then the water warmed. Not the whole river, just around me. A sudden warmth that didn't belong there, like stepping into a familiar room after being outside too long. My muscles loosened without my permission. The panic quieted for half a second, not because I was safe, but because something soothed me. And then I heard a voice I hadn't heard in months. My mom. I felt it before I fully processed it. That impossible feeling of recognition. Like my brain grabbed the sound and screamed, "Yes, that's her." Our eyes met. Her voice was distorted, like it was coming through a cheap speaker or a walkie-talkie, garbled and rough. And when she spoke, it wasn't gentle. It was a growl. I could hear it through the bubbles and the rush of water, like the river itself was carrying her sound straight into my head. Her jaw was like theirs, jagged, wrong, horrible. Between her teeth was my blue pineapple flip-flop. Her face was pressed to the riverbed, just like the others. Her head lay among dozens of heads, different eyes, different colors, brown, blue, green, all of them locked on me, even the ones that seemed too far away to be looking directly. But I knew her. It was her green eyes. They were the only thing that stayed the same. Under the water, they looked almost yellow, bright against the blue. When she realized I was looking at her, her smile widened, and I swear I heard a bubbling laugh, even though it didn't sound like laughter should. She looked hungry. The strap on the flip-flop snapped. I saw it break. I saw her bite down, chewing the plastic as if it was food. Her teeth scraped together with a sound like metal grinding on concrete, even underwater. Then everything snapped. My head whipped back up to the surface like I'd been thrown. Air hit my lungs in a violent gasp. The world above water was bright and harsh. I coughed hard, choking water out, and the only thought in my head was, "Get away, get away." I swam to one of the side pools, clawing my way into calmer water. I don't remember exactly how I got out. My memory cuts out like someone tore out a page. I know later my dad said I threw up a lot of water and cried until my face hurt. The ride home was silent. I sat in the back seat, staring at my foot, tracing my fingers over the bite marks left in my skin from where the flip-flop had been pulled. My dad was furious in that cold, controlled way he had. He didn't ask if I was okay. He called me an idiot for chasing my shoe. He said he'd be ashamed if he'd ever done something that stupid. I didn't tell him what I saw. I didn't tell anyone. Not directly. Once I told my sister, but I said it like it was a dream. I acted casual, like I was sharing a weird nightmare. I watched her face the whole time, looking for anything. Recognition, fear, confirmation. She stared with wide eyes through the whole story, then laughed at the end like I'd told her something creepy and funny. Over time, that's what it became in my head too. A dream, a bad thought. Something my brain made up because I was scared and grieving and young. It turned into a family story instead, like families do when they want to file something sharp down into something safe. That one time Marin fell into the river. It gets told like a joke, like a childhood accident, like a lesson about being careful. And I'm not drowning in trauma. I still go to pools. I still go to lakes. I don't freeze every time I see water. I don't have panic attacks on beaches. Life kept going, and I kept going with it. I'm in college now. Last week in political science class, we talked about the 2008 recession. I knew it was bad, obviously, but hearing it explained with an adult brain made things click in a way they didn't when I was a kid. I understood why my house felt tense, why my parents were stressed, why everything seemed brittle even before my mom disappeared. I'm writing this now because I don't know what to do with what I found. More people have gone missing in and around my hometown than I realized. Tourists and locals. Over the years, names I never heard as a kid, stories I wasn't told. I started reading articles. I didn't mean to binge them, but once I started, I couldn't stop. Every time I clicked a new one, I felt lightheaded, like my body was reacting before my mind could catch up, because every face looked familiar. Not vague familiar, not maybe I've seen them at the gas station. I mean that loud kind of familiar, that hits you like a warning. You know this person. You've seen them before. I found articles about 8 people who disappeared in my town between 2004 and 2008, and I swear I have seen every single one of them before. I don't know how. I don't know where. I just know the feeling that came with each photo was the same feeling I had in that river when I looked down and saw too many eyes staring back at me. The same sense of recognition, wrapped in fear, like my brain was trying to protect me from remembering something it couldn't hold. Maybe there's a normal explanation. Maybe my memory is mixing things up. Maybe grief can glue random faces into a false pattern. I've tried to tell myself that, but I keep thinking about my mom's eyes under the water, the way they locked on mine. And I keep thinking about that flip-flop strap breaking and the sound of her teeth. And now I'm wondering if the river didn't just try to take me that day. I'm wondering if it has been taking people for years, and if part of me already knew, even as a kid, even before I had the words for it.